That we're going to be we're going to be content heavy, go with a lot of content to start with, but we're going to ensure we have at least 15 minutes for Q&A at the back end of the session. Just keep that in mind. In the interim, it'll be great if your mics are muted, so we can focus on the content while we are on, which also means that the chat window is available for you to share not just your questions, but also any insights, observations, commentary that you might have, right? Um, we do have an assurance that no matter what happens, in case we run out of time and we're not able to answer all the questions, we still have the chat window. And if you can drop your email ID with your comments, then we can get back to you on the questions you raise. Right? So that's from the mechanics perspective. Through this whole journey, we have Arun with us. Arun, are you able to come on screen? Arun is, as you can see, content expert, learning expert, change expert. He's got a significant background in all those fields, and he's also an expert moderator. So he's going to be the person behind the screen who's helping us run this session well. Arun, technology reasons, I'm not able to make you a co-host. I'm guessing that authority doesn't sit with me in this mechanism. If someone can help, that'd be great. Uh, in the meanwhile, I'm Krish, and thanks, Vida, for the very um, humbling introduction you gave. But he's not far wrong. I have been working on change management for a good chunk of my career, and I've had the privilege of working with fairly complex change, and I'm hoping I can share some parts of that with you. Arun and I belong to MARG. MARG is an organization that's been around for a couple of decades now, almost. And we have been through a journey of being a consulting organization, working with organizations to help their finances, help their leadership capability. And that naturally moved to change management. And that's what we have found ourselves being an expert of in the Indian system for the last decade or so. And our journey has continued from there to areas like culture, areas like team dynamics. With Arun Krish being introduced, with Mark being introduced, it's important that we know where ProSci comes from. ProSci is a name that comes from two words, professional and science. It's an organization that was founded 3 decades back, and the name is meant to connote the fact that we are talking about a profession called change management, and we intend to be as scientific as possible in everything that we say and do. Why scientific? Because at heart, we are a research organization. We said very earlier on, we are not going to talk about change management in abstract terms. We will go to people who are doing change management and ask them, how do you do change? How do you deliver change? And that has allowed us to deliver a lot of tools, a lot of content, a very, very robust methodology. And that's what ProSci is well known for, a strong methodology of individual change called ADKAR, and a larger methodology for organizational change, which is what we're going to peek into today. This is us, and let me take a moment and ask you about yourselves. It'll be great to know where you come from. Could you share with us using this Mentimeter screen that you're seeing up on your laptops? Is it possible for you to share where you're calling in from? Where are you? Where in India are you from? I think on your screens, if you use a QR code, you should be able to see the India map. There you go. I see primarily Bangalore at this point. So at this moment, we'll assume that it's us. And Motilal, thank you. Jai Maharashtra. I'm saying that tongue in cheek because I'm from Bombay too, and I miss the chart. Hey Shika, thanks for sharing that. So as you can see, and as people trickle in, I'm expecting the numbers to go up. So that's from a perspective of where we come from. I have a follow-on question while you're on this topic about you. Um, I'm curious on what do you see as change projects? What kind of change projects do you normally end up working on? Again, if it's easier to use a chat message, you can use a chat messenger, or of course, you can use the QR code. And I would agree, technology adoption is the name of the game in the near term, I think two things are happening in the industry as we see it. One is technology adoption. Two is organizations trying to deal with the hybrid workforce and the restructuring that is revolving around not just the hybrid workforce, but also the technology changes that are happening. And there's a significant upsurge on it. Let's keep this thought in mind. I'll probably want to poll you guys a little more on where you come from a little further. Motilal also says that he's having a tech and a project perspective. So before we go any further, definitionally, let's get a couple of things aligned. We have always had two sides to any change we have described. The one side was the actual process that is getting rolled out, the policy that's getting rolled out. But on the other side, we always had how is that being adopted and used? So two sides of the same coin. On the one hand, I have a blueprint. On the other hand, I have the people using the blueprint. On the one hand, I'm saying that I need to have a collaborative mindset. I need to have a digital mindset. I have a new mindset of growth. But then on the other side, do you have people demonstrating the behaviors that drive that mindset? On the one side, we used to have, or we still have, enabling technology. As you can see how AI is rolling out, there is one element of AIs, which is the organization-wide rollout of an AI tool or a platform. So the platform is available. Are people using it the way it's supposed to be used? The reason I'm calling this out, the reason why as ProSci we're calling this out is we strongly believe that there is a unified value proposition involved in how change succeeds. As an organization, we start off by saying, hey, there is a pain point over here, or there is an opportunity over there, and we start driving towards a change. And usually the driving is because we have a trigger of some kind. Maybe it's an internal trigger, maybe it's an external trigger. And at that point, we start thinking about the technical side of the change, not the nuts and bolts of the change. What should we do? At what cost should we do it? In what time frame should we do it? For which groups in the organizations should we do it? So we have a lot of thought around the technical side of change. And that does not necessarily imply it's going to be technological, right? Even if you set up a work from home policy, the work from home policy becomes the technical side of change. And on the other side, as we go through this change, we also need a hat which speaking about how will people engage, adopt, and use the change. That is the people side of change. And when these two sides work together closely, we do succeed. We see that change lands well. So keep this in mind. Two sides of a coin, technical side of change, people side of change. Together, we succeed when both the sides work well together. Fine. In that case, defining change management. What do we mean by change management? We're talking about change management being something simple. It's a set of processes and tools, all of them focused on leading the people side of change in order to get a desired outcome. We want to try and use as much of tools and techniques and processes as possible in order to land a change, focusing on the people side of change. And hopefully, if we do this well enough, organizationally, we can get further. Organizationally, we can get into leadership competency, we can get into a strategic capability. That's what we're thinking of when we say change management. With that broad thought, the webinar, if you think about it, we said it's beyond defining change management. That was defining change management. But let's step beyond that. If we go past the thought process on what is this animal called change management, the question then becomes, how do we help others do change management? How do we help others engage in change management? When I say others, we need to talk about what that means. Remember, the webinar is about finding a value for change management. Value for change management for whom? And that's where it's important for us to understand the different roles that exist during a change. You're going to have changes where you have a sponsor, you have a leader of the change, and the leader of the change has a different hat, has a different set of concerns as compared to the people managers who are possibly getting impacted by the change. And in the meanwhile, there is a project manager, and the project manager has another thought. The project manager is thinking in terms of, I have a cost, I have a scope, I have a schedule, how do I deliver in that period of time? And finally, you have change partners. You have people maybe in HR, maybe in OD, maybe in process excellence teams, maybe in revenue assurance teams, maybe in internal audit, maybe in finance, maybe in technology. You have other change partners, and they are also employees, they're also leaders, they're also managers, and they're saying, how can I help? Because this change makes sense for me. We have to keep in mind that when we say the topic of this webinar is defining the value of change management, going past the definition of change management, we have to ask ourselves, for whom, defining it for which audience? What are they concerned about? What is their view of the world? What is their view of what this animal called change management is? And if we cannot answer that in a meaningful way, then we really can't succeed in managing change well. Since we have still numbers which are manageable, could you drop a message into the chat window and share which of these groups do you have the most difficulty in seeing the value of managing change better? Which of these four groups do you struggle the most to define the value of change management? You have sponsors, you have people managers, you have project managers, you have change partners. Where is the conversation the most sticky? You could probably just drop it into the chat window. To be fair, you can also just unmute and chime in. Asmi, Vaibhav, Motilal, Shikha, you guys can just unmute and go ahead and share. Which group do you find the most difficulty in sharing the value of change management? Asmi says project managers. And I can relate to that because the project manager is already working under the burden of the scope, the timelines, and so on and so forth. The project manager might struggle. Mozilla says people managers, which is also fair. The average people manager saying, I don't even want the change. Why are you talking to me about managing the change, right? I'm glad that we're not saying sponsors have a challenge. It's good if the average sponsor is saying, I do see a value of change management, which is the kind of opportunity we're looking for. But we need to address them too. And we will take the time on that. We will try and see how we can integrate them into this thought process. So what do we have ahead of us? The way we, oh, thanks Arun for that. Arun is giving me a tip that I've set it up so that I'm allowing all participants to unmute and to start video. So feel free to join in, to unmute and start video. Arun, this should allow you to start video too. So what do we have? We are saying that defining the value of change management is not an abstraction. It's not in general. You have to make that story, that definition of change management, meaningful to different roles. What you say to a sponsor is different from what you say to a people manager, is different from what you say to a project manager. In each of those cases, you're going to have a very, very different conversation. So what should we tell them, right? We're going to start with something we call bottom line upfront in ProSci, right? Let's start with telling you what is the value of change management. The value of change management is accelerating and delivering people-dependent portion of the project ROI and value. The value of change management is reducing the costs and risk of poor adoption. The value of change management is best served in your audience's language. We're going to be talking about each of these items in the next half an hour or so. Let's start with that first one. What do we mean when you say accelerating and delivering the people-dependent portion of a project ROI or a ROI or value? The first challenge you often walk into is people assume that change management brings a different value on the table as compared to project management. But that is absolutely not the case. What actually happens is in every project, the project delivers a bunch of benefits, the bunch of value that the organization gets out of the project succeeding. Of them, a portion of the benefit comes from people adopting and using. Look at a bunch of variables, bunch of different projects in the lower half of the slide. On the extreme left, you have a project where whether people adopt and use the change or not, the organization succeeds. Let's say the organization is moved from location A to location B in order to save on leasing costs, in order to consolidate workforce and reduce the costs. The moment that new location has been set up and people have moved to it and the old leases have been closed, the organization has succeeded in the change. Whether people come into the new location and collaborate and enjoy the new location or not, on the extreme left, the organization has already succeeded. And as you can see from there on, as we go from the left to right, you see a greater and greater component of dependency on people adopting the change. On the extreme right, you have a change where it's 100% dependent upon people adopting the change. And that could be, let's say, a new culture that you're rolling out. You're saying that my culture should be more collaborative. My culture should be more customer centric. My culture should be less expertise driven. In all these cases, you're going to automatically find that unless people adopt and use, no matter how strong your culture, vision, and document is, you don't succeed. When we say people dependent component of the project ROI, we are saying the project has a certain ROI. Of that, a certain portion comes from people. Let me ask you that question. Can you guys, again, put into the chat window in your mind, typically in your projects, what kind of percentage do you have? What percentage of your project's results and outcomes depend upon employees adopting and using the change? Remember an example that I'm showing on the screen. On the extreme left, 0% of this project's results depend upon employee adoption usage. 100% of this project's results depends upon employee adoption usage. Where do you fall? Where do you see projects typically falling? The projects that you guys called out. You said tech adoption, for example, right? Let's say it's tech adoption. Maybe it's maybe it's restructuring projects. Maybe it's mergers and acquisitions. How do you see the ratios in those projects? Mutula says 80%. Says a good chunk of my project's benefits are going to come from people using it. I'm rolling out business intelligence. Because I've rolled out BI, it doesn't mean that people are immediately going to be able to apply it. It's not necessarily, unless people apply it, use the BI data, use the BI platform, I don't get the benefit out of it. Shika says 50%, and that might be, like I said, could be a location change, could be an M&A. Sometimes just rolling it out immediately can succeed. Asmi is pointing out the L&D storyline, which is beautiful, right? The fact is, by definition, let's say I've been charged with setting up the succession plan for the organization. If succession is not working, then how do I succeed? I'm setting up a capability center. If it doesn't succeed, if people don't adopt, how will I succeed? This is easy to speak about. Structurally, how do we manage it? I'm giving you a high-level overview. Let's say I'm trying to get employee health records set up in an organization, in a hospital, right? How do I do this? How do I think through this percentage of project results dependent on employee adoption usage? The first thing we do is what is it we're trying to achieve? Org benefits, project objectives, what is it that we want to get done? Having done that, the next thing we do is which of these are critical for success? You're going to be comparing them against each other. So when you say patient throughput and experience at 9, you mean in comparison to the rest, that's very, very, very important. In comparison to the rest, modernization of platform is perhaps less important. You're doing a relative understanding. And then the third thing you do is a qualitative description. Which of this needs employee adoption usage? Is qualitative. You're just starting off with saying, all right, patient throughput and experience, say, man, it's all dependent on how people adopt and use it, how nurses behave, how the nurse administrative staff behave, how the billing, not billing process, but how the billing conversation is handled, and so on and so forth. Having done the qualitative, we then think about it a little differently. We say, if people didn't adopt and use at all, would I still get the benefit? So look at that first item. Patient throughput and experience, if people didn't adopt and use, I would get none of the benefit. But if I look at the modernization of the platform, even if people don't adopt and use, having modernized it, having made the data safe, having made the reports accessible, 90% of the benefit comes in immediately. There's the back of the envelope, and guess what? It's still based on the same project objectives that you and the sponsor have signed up to. There's a quick and simple way for us to answer an important question. For our project, what are the expected results and outcomes? And what percentage of those results and outcomes depend upon people changing the way they do their jobs? First way in which we can help define the value of change management. And you're going to see this, each of these ways that we're going to talk about, 5 ways. You're going to see a couple of questions. And towards the end, I'll give you a cheat sheet. There'll be one cheat sheet that gives you the whole thing together. Let's move on to the second one, improving how quickly, how many, and how effectively people adopt the solution. We're going from one to another, right? We're on the one hand, we're saying, okay, let's just think about the project's ROI. Do we have a benefit coming out of it? What percentage of that benefit depends upon people coming on board? Then we're going to the other side and saying, well, is there a way for us to track that? Should we be watching how people adopt the solution? Vince Lombardi is a football coach, and his quote, the achievements of an organization are the results of combined effort of each individual. It resonates to us in any sports team context, but also think about it in terms of an organizational context, in terms of big projects. Ideally, in a perfect world, change looks like this. There's a current state, we all go into the transition state together, we all come out of it, we all go to the future state, and yay, we succeed. That's not how quite that's not how it usually plays out. Instead of that, you have the transition state becoming chewing gum. We run around doing a lot of work over and over again. People start dropping out very early in the game. And because people start dropping out, our transition state is not as pretty as this picture. And we end up with a future state where not everyone is on board. And what we're getting is definitely something less than we could have hoped for. With this in mind, what should we be looking for? We're saying there are three things that human beings do during change that wearing a change hat we can work with. The first one is how quickly are people coming on board? I'm taking Asmi's example from an L&D perspective, right? I trained all of them, of course. They all went back. Having gone back, how quickly are people beginning to use the job aids, beginning to use those first few steps they're supposed to have, and beginning to see an impact in their first few conversations? Tick mark. But we are not satisfied with that because we know that people start using something soon after learning about it, and then they stop using it. So our second question is ultimate utilization. How many continue to use it? Are they using it a month later? Are they using it 2 months later? Are they using the behavioral parts of what they learned 2 months later? Are they using the technical part of what they learned 2 months later? That's my second question. How long are they continuing to use it? Versus some of them saying, yeah, I kind of know how this works. Let me stop using it. And then comes the third question. Even if they are using it, are they using it well? We all know how that plays out, right? It could be an analytical platform where you look at it and you take the download in CSV and put it into an Excel file and put it into PowerPoint. It could be a behavioral change, a cultural change, where the person says, you asked me to do X, I've done X. Just X. I will not do X plus. I'll not do modify it anyway. It's your change, not my change. So you told me to do it. I'm just doing that part. Proficiency is how well are they doing it? And we are hoping that when we do change really well, all of this works out. So again, question for all of you. Chat window works. Unmuting also works. Question for you is, how often do you see your projects affected by speed of adoption, ultimate utilization, or proficiency? Do you always see them affected? Do you rarely see them affected? Do you sometimes see them affected? How relevant are these three for your project's success in your experience? Motila says always, and I relate. The interesting thing, and this is where perhaps the value of this conversation is leaders have, especially in the beginning of the project, have a very positive view on how these would work out. So it's easy for the PowerPoint slides and the charter slides to say 100% adoption, 100% utilization. Everyone's going to be very proficient at it. It's easy to put those things, but not necessarily to be realistic about it and develop a roadmap around it. It's a tough thing for people to actually slow down and say, wait, what would this mean? What does speed of adoption mean at different layers and different levels of the organization? What does it mean from an ultimate utilization perspective? How many of this level of the organization or this particular sub-function of the organization are going to show me the proficiency I'm looking for? Just to help you see this in a different context. We can do this in very many different ways. You can model revenue, you can model cost, you can model very many things. Let's assume this is the cash flow of a project. As you can see, we are basically saying, as this is before the project, something was not working, your change has gone through, go live has happened, and it's not working, something is working, right? What does this imply for us? How would we view it through that lens we just discussed? We're saying that the slope and shape is that speed of adoption. The slope and shape is speed of adoption, meaning I would like to shift this to the left as much as I can. That's what we're talking about, is slope and shape. How quickly are people coming on board? Ultimate utilization. Eventually, how many are staying with the change versus saying, okay, I'm taking the next bus. Or saying, well, it looks like you've stopped pushing me on compliance. Let me move on. The third element is proficiency. How much are they putting effort into it to understand it, to use it, so that they and the organization is seeing the value of it? The height of each of these bars become proficiency. And sometimes it's good to look at it from a flip perspective. What does it look like when it doesn't work? Look at the speed of adoption of this gray project. There's a blue project, which is ideal, and the gray project is having a slope that is much flatter. It stops at a much lower point, ultimate utilization. And its proficiency, if I add up the total of all these bars, it's going to be much less. In terms of our vocabulary, sponsors know this happens. When we go and talk to sponsors and ask them, do you see the ultimate utilization you would like to see? Most of the time they say no. And there's a great opportunity for us to bring this on the table. So again, the way we want you to think about it, for your change, how would you define speed of adoption, ultimate utilization, proficiency from the people side perspective? What do you want of those managers? What do you want of those employees? And having done that, how do you describe, how do you surface the assumptions that we have made on how quickly, how many, how effectively will people adopt the solution? These are conversations you're having with your leadership. Value of change management, we can improve this. Let's go on to the third one. Reducing the costs and risks of poor adoption, like resistance, conflict, and frustration. What are we talking about here? If you look at the item that we just finished discussing, we talked about the contribution to good ROI by people adopting early, ultimate utilization being high, proficiency being good. But another way to look at change management is also seeing how we can avoid frustration, how we can avoid the indifference that the organization might show about the change. And usually when the organization is indifferent about the change, you're rolling out the change and it's absolutely quiet. You've done your UATs, you've done your change agents, you're beating the drum really, really strong, but no reactions. In that environment, we often end up with these R's and E's. We do rework. We have to rescope the change. We have to redo many things that we did not wish to touch again. We have to retreat and say phase 2 of the project. We have to run the whole thing again. The implication of this is not just high cost, it's also change fatigue. I'm sure as leaders, you have run into this situation before where you did this change, and a year later, year and a half later, 2 years later, you're doing the same change. You did a change because sponsor X was there, sponsor X moved to another role, and now you have to do the same change with sponsor Y. And you have seen the organization saying, oh, not again. That's the cost over here. And that cost over here can be fairly grievous for us because eventually, as an individual, like I said, the organization has a morale problem, has change fatigue, the stakeholders of those different groups struggle. There's an impact at an initiator level. More of my initiatives don't succeed. My failure rate increases. My time to success increases. My customers might have an impact. My vendors might have an impact. Internal stakeholders might have an impact. And as an organization, there is significant opportunity cost to doing things over and over again. There is a credibility challenge. Again, can I invite you guys to share from your perspective, in your experience, what are some of these costs and risks? What are things you have seen failing Because we did not manage change well. I'm going to give you some of mine, but before that, mic over to you guys. Either the chat window or on the mic. What do you see happening when we don't do change management well? I'm a patient guy. Thanks, Motilal. That's a beautiful point, right? And again, in today's world, we know there's the visible attrition and the invisible attrition, right? People disengaging, people switching off, people um, staying but not doing, which can be a struggle, especially for us as change. Weber was pointing out the same thing, right? People are disengaged. And sometimes it's just saturation. Sometimes people are saying, just too much happening, right? I can't handle it anymore. So it's not always because they don't want to. Sometimes it's because they are not able to, in which case it's a different issue. Bottom line, you still didn't get the people you want. Asmi is pointing out that disengagement and the frustration part. Asmi, since you pointed out that you have that L&D hat, you know you as a downstream impact, the change has happened, a lot of noise around it has happened, but when they walk into the training room, when they walk into that cross-functional training room, and they start scratching their heads and they say, "Why am I doing this?" I'm sure you feel the frustration too, right? Bigger picture, we are saying these are all things that we have seen, costs and risks of change not happening well, right? Exactly like you guys said, attrition is an issue, delayed timelines are an issue, resistance is an issue, right? And these unfortunately tend to happen, which allows us to call this out to our leaders, to our project managers, to our people managers. I've often said this to people managers. Okay, fine. So it sounds like you guys don't want this change. You know what happens when you say you don't want this change? It just comes back with double the intensity and a shorter timeline. Is that how you want to play it? What we're trying to say is, yes, calling out the upside is a good idea, but sometimes it's also a sensible idea to call out the downsides of not doing something. What are the biggest costs and risks to the project if people do not effectively adopt and use the solution? Keep in mind that your leaders are quite certain that the right way to do change management is as quickly as possible. Let's roll out the change, do some communication, do some training, and we should be fine. And these are questions, these are discussions that can help them see the change a little differently. The value of change management, the fourth element, the value of change management is increasing the likelihood of meeting project objectives on time and on budget. That's an interesting one. We are saying, and this is why we are a research organization. This data that I'm sharing with you comes from research. We asked our research respondents to share with us how they saw their projects having been executed in terms of change management effectiveness, poor, fair, good, or excellent. And we correlated that with whether their projects had met or exceeded objectives. This is the curve we got. And notice, if you look at what the curve is saying, it's saying that when we have poor change management, 13% of projects succeeds. Excellent change management, 88% of projects succeed. That is a curve that we can bet with. We are saying the likelihood of project success increases when we do change management well. And here's the interesting thing. It's not just that parameter, it's also schedule. When I think in terms of can I do it on time? Yes. Why do we know that? Because we know that we are saving time on not having to redo it. We planned for 3 town halls. The first 2 town halls, the wrong people came. There's one huge gossip chain happening and they've misunderstood the change. What is the response? Another 2 town halls. You did the training, only half the people who are supposed to turn up turned up, the rest didn't turn up. We did the UATs. The people who came for the UATs were not the right team, or they were the power users, and the regular users didn't turn up, and we have to do things over again, over and over again. So think about all the ways in which we can save time. And it's not just time, it's also budget. Notice that all the three curves, the better we move on the x-axis, the more we move towards the right side, the better we are. And here is possibly one interesting thing, right? Just here. Even if I'm just thinking in terms of moving from poor change management to fair change management, it's 3 times the likelihood of project success. And those are really worth playing with. So, yet another way in which we can help define the value of change management is in terms of just the sheer probability. What is the value to you, to sponsor, project manager, people manager, change partner, whichever group that is, whichever role that is? What is the value of increasing the likelihood that people do a better job? Fair enough. Is that all there is to it? There's one last point that's worth underlining, and that is we often speak about change management purely in terms of what we deliver. As a change manager, we deliver communication, we deliver training, we deliver workshops, we deliver discussions, we do town halls. There's a lot of things that we execute, right? We do the stuff, but that's not where the game is. The people that you speak with would like to hear these words. Why? Because these are the words they are responsible for on the right side. The people that you're speaking with are responsible for delivering results. Jeff Hyatt, Prosci founder and the creator of the ATCA model, said executives speak 3 languages: finance, finance, finance. But we know there's more to it, right? There's strategy, execution, competitive advantage, their own legacy. Leaders like to speak of their own legacy, but this is leaders. If we talk about people managers, they're going to talk about stakeholder satisfaction. They're going to talk about employee satisfaction. They're going to talk about getting work done, getting things done. In each of those cases, our job is to express change management in their own language. If we don't do that, that's a big minus. In the words of Nelson Mandela, if you talk to a man in a language that he understands, that goes up here. If we talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. So, what is the language we default to? What is the language we end up relying on more often than not? Can I ask you to drop a few words that you think you should stop using when you talk to stakeholders about change management? What are words that you're using now that you should stop using? A chat window works. What I'm asking you to think about is you're presenting the value of doing change better in a particular way today. But as you present it, you use some words that make the person think about what you execute and make that person miss out on the value you deliver. So I'm asking you to reflect on what are some words that you use that are more like the words on the left side. And I'm then going to ask you what are some words you can start using, which are more like the words on the right side. Obviously, these words are going to be different for each of you because you come from different organizations, different experiences, you work on different projects. Which are the words you would stop using? Which are the words you would start using? Thanks, Arun. And you're right. Resistance seems to be the most visible form of change failing. Uh, but perhaps we don't say resistance, we say making them change ready, right? And instead of talking about, oh, there's going to be resistance, and they say, yes, yes, there's going to be resistance, etc., which is the same path. If we point out the words on the right side, if we start using the word change ready, it's more positive. It's also a different mindset, right? Thanks, Motilal. Motilal says, I would try to stop using the word disagreement, and he's got a point. Disagreement probably is going to remind them of disagreement, right? But what is the alternative then, right? What could he say instead of disagreement? He can say alignment. He can say, what I deliver for you is alignment. What I'm delivering for you is consistency. What I'm delivering for you is ultimate utilization. Again, you're painting a picture to them of not what you execute, but what they will see when you deliver whatever you're promising to deliver. We tend to stick to what we know, but we need to take the risk of going to what they need. Why should we care about that? Why is it important that we focus on what they need? I think this is probably the oldest statement that you've probably heard multiple times in different contexts. People don't buy a quarter-inch drill bit, they buy a quarter-inch hole. I'm not going to the shop to, I mean, even if on Amazon I'm going to put in uh, Black and Decker and this particular drill, I'm not actually buying a drill. I'm trying to make a hole in my wall in the house that I live in to hang a picture. I'm trying to make a hole in the wall to put in a bookcase. I'm trying to make a hole in a picture frame to hang it on some place. Your leaders, your managers, your project managers, all those teams, they're trying to get their jobs done. So your sponsor is trying to land a project. Your people manager is trying to reduce friction in their work. Your project manager is trying to deliver to that cost and scope and quality. Your change partners are trying to make the project a success. And in that context, it is important for us to help them see the value of what you bring to the table. We have to talk in a language that they can relate to. So which specific words and phrases should you start using to define the value and impact of change management, I'm sorry. Which specific words and phrases should you stop using when defining the value of change management? Essentially, if I look at the whole story together, this is what we're calling out, right? The value of change management is accelerating and delivering the people-dependent portion of the project ROI and value. And how do you do that? By asking this question. The value of change management is improving how quickly, how effectively people adopt the solution. How do you do that? By asking this question, right? This is what I said earlier, is your cheat sheet. This is a cheat sheet for you to visualize how you establish the value of change management to different groups. And as you do that, bigger picture, keep in mind that you're not just defining the value of change management, because the word defining sounds very intellectual and cerebral. What you're probably doing is contextualizing. In that busy world that audience of yours who was there is living, how do you help them see the value of change management? Of the thousands of things they could do, how do you position the value of change management that this can give you this result? You are selling the value of change management because you got to make them buy into it. You got to make them invest into it. You're revealing connections. You're helping them see change management in context of other things that they're doing, the values that it could bring. And most important, you're personalizing it. You cannot do this exercise that we just finished doing with a sheet of paper and say, forget everyone, and just do it. If Arun is the leader you're speaking with, you have to say this in context of Arun's view of the world. Not just Arun the leader or Arun the people manager or Arun the project manager, but Arun the person also. Establishing that value of change management is what we're trying to do. That is what I wanted to share with you guys. We started some time back saying, this is what we're going to try and achieve. I hope that was not too dense for you, and it looks like you guys were able to connect with what I was calling out. But now it's Q&A. Again, it's open mic. Any questions that you have that I can answer. It need not be a question. It can be an observation, can be a comment, it can be anything you like. Over to you. Thank you, Shilka. Arun, I'm passing the mic to you in case you have any direct questions. Oh, thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Arun. And I would echo what Arun has put in the chat window. Please reach back to us for thoughts that are not now. I'm sure you guys are in the middle of a very busy day and you're right now thinking, okay, 10 minutes left. Can I make the presentation for a 4 o'clock meeting or something like that? Reach back to us. Reach back to us in any form and shape that you like. Find anything that we can help with. Veera, Swaroop, any closing comments from your end?
Thank you, Mr. Krish. So, as we come to the end of this insightful webinar on change management, I want to take a moment to express a heartfelt gratitude to each one of you for joining us today. A special thank you to Mr. Krish for sharing his valuable knowledge and expertise with us. So, once again, thank you for being part of this session. So, we look forward to seeing you in future webinars. Until then, stay inspired and embrace change with confidence. So good day, everyone.
A wonderful day. Great meeting all of you.